I'm a 34-year-old guy, been married for 6 years to my wife, Sumi. I've always thought of myself as just a regular guy, nothing flashy. I grew up poor in a tiny fishing village, the kind where dreams were something you saw in other people's lives. My father used to say, if you want something, you build it yourself. That stuck with me. When I was 17, I left home with nothing but a backpack and a ridiculous dream to create my own car company someday. Yeah, I know, it sounds insane, like a Netflix underdog movie. But that drive kept me alive through years of grinding in garages, learning every nut and bolt. I studied at night, worked during the day, and slowly, piece by piece, built a workshop. That workshop became a small auto business. That business became something bigger. And eventually, it turned into Hyundai. Yeah, that Hyundai. I'm not saying I did it alone. I had investors later on, sure, but I built the bones of it from nothing. Here's the thing, though. What people don't see is how personal relationships can rot in the shadows while your public life is thriving. While I was pulling 18-hour days trying to get the company off the ground, my wife was always busy with her own thing. And at first, I thought, good, she's independent. But over time, the signs started creeping in. Missed calls, excuses that didn't make sense, smiling at texts she wouldn't explain. And the one that really stuck with me, the day she forgot to pick me up from the hospital after I collapsed in the workshop. I had to take a cab home, and she was sitting there on the couch, acting like I'd interrupted her favorite show. Looking back, that was the first crack in the glass. But at the time, I told myself I was just tired, paranoid, overworked. God, I wish I'd trusted my gut sooner. The first real confrontation happened on a rainy Tuesday night. I had just wrapped up a late meeting with some potential investors. It was one of those conversations where every word matters because your whole future is hanging on whether they believe in you or not. I was exhausted, my head pounding, my shirt clinging to me from the rain. When I got home, the lights were dim, and Sumi was in the kitchen, hair done up, makeup perfect, wearing that red dress she usually only wears for special occasions. But there was no dinner on the table, no candles, no wine. Just her, sipping a glass of something, looking startled when she saw me. I asked, were you expecting someone? She laughed, this short, fake little laugh. Babe, don't be weird. I just felt like dressing up for myself. Except here's the thing. The perfume she was wearing wasn't hers. Yeah, I know that sounds crazy, but I buy her perfume every birthday. This one was floral, too sweet, almost cloying. Not her style at all. And then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, tilted the screen away from me, and said, it's just Mina. Her best friend, apparently. But I could see enough in that split second, a man's name. I didn't call her out. Not then. I smiled, said I'd go take a shower. But inside, I was boiling. That was the first time I started to believe the lies weren't just harmless, white lies. And here's the twisted part. The next day, she acted like nothing had happened. She even asked how the investor meeting went, like she was the most supportive wife in the world. That night, I decided something. I wasn't going to accuse her until I had proof. I started small. I wasn't about to blow up my marriage over gut feelings and a whiff of cheap perfume. So I began paying attention. I noted the times she said she was with Mina or running errands. I checked receipts left in the trash, glances at her phone, subtle changes in her tone when she talked to me versus whoever was on the other end of the line. One Thursday, she said she was heading to a late yoga class. We don't even have a yoga studio within 5 miles, but I nodded like a good husband and watched her leave. I waited 15 minutes, then drove out, taking the long route so I wouldn't cross paths with her. Sure enough, I spotted our car parked outside a little rooftop bar in the city. My stomach sank. Through the glass, I saw her at a table, laughing, leaning in close to a man I'd never seen before. He was touching her hand, not in a friendly way. I didn't go in. My instinct was to storm over, but something told me to hold back. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a photo. My hands were shaking so badly the picture came out blurry, but it was enough for me to know I wasn't imagining things anymore. Here's where it gets worse. When she came home later that night, she didn't smell like wine or beer. She smelled like him. That same too sweet floral scent I'd caught before. She looked me dead in the eye and said, class ran late. I'm exhausted. I just said, yeah, I can see that. That was the night I realized I wasn't just dealing with lies. I was dealing with someone who could look me in the face and rewrite reality without blinking. The bigger lie came just a week later, and it hit like a sucker punch. I'd been working on a new contract with overseas partners, a huge deal that could push Hyundai into a new market. I came home early to surprise her, thinking maybe I could pretend everything was fine and just breathe for a night. The house was empty. At first, I thought she'd gone shopping or out with friends, but then I noticed her laptop open on the dining table. I don't normally snoop, or at least I didn't before, but something in me clicked. I sat down, and the screen was already on an email thread. It wasn't to Mina. It was to him. And not only was she writing things I can't even repeat here without feeling sick, but she was telling him I was barely keeping the company afloat, and that I didn't have the guts to leave her. That part cut deeper than the affair itself. This wasn't just cheating. She was mocking me, undermining me to some stranger. She even mentioned getting what she deserved after wasting years with me. When she came home later, I asked casually how her day went. She said she'd been at the library, catching up on some reading. The library in our town? Closed on Thursdays. I didn't tell her I'd read the emails. Not yet. I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and told her I had to fly to Busan the next morning for business. That was true, but what she didn't know was that I'd also be making a few calls from there. Calls that would change everything. The next morning, I left for Busan with a small suitcase and a bigger plan. My trap was simple and brutal. I told her I'd be gone for 3 days. In reality, my meetings would only take 1. The rest of the time, I'd be back in the city, watching. Before I left, I made sure the car's GPS tracking app was reinstalled on her phone. She'd deleted it months ago, claiming it slowed her phone down. Right. I also asked my friend Jean, who owed me more than a few favors, to keep an eye on the house and send me updates. The first day in Busan went fine. I crushed my meetings, signed 2 preliminary agreements, and pretended on the phone with her like everything was normal. But on day 2, the day she thought I was still away, Jean texted me a photo. Her. That same man. Walking into our house at 2:17 p.m. No hesitation, no glancing around like they were sneaking. They went straight inside. My chest felt like it was caving in. It wasn't even the fact she brought him into our space. It was the casualness of it. Like this had been going on for a long time. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I let them have their little whatever it was. And at 7 p.m., Jean texted again. They just left. She's alone now. That's when I drove back. Quietly. Parked 2 streets away. Walked up to the house and slipped inside. She was in the kitchen, reheating leftovers, humming like nothing had happened. Hey, I said. She froze. You're back early? I just smiled. Yeah, early enough. I leaned against the counter, watching her pretend to be surprised. So, did you have a good day? I asked. She nodded too quickly. Yeah, just relaxed, did some laundry, watched a bit of TV. I kept my tone light. Did you have any company? Her eyes flickered for half a second, that little micro-expression liars can't hide, before she plastered on the smile again. No. Why? You don't trust me. That's when I decided to push her. Jean said he saw someone here. Tall guy. Wore a gray jacket. Without missing a beat, she burst out laughing. Oh my God, that was the plumber. The sink in the bathroom upstairs was leaking, so I called a plumber. He was here. What? 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I raised an eyebrow. Funny. Jean said your car didn't move for 5 hours. And here came the most absurd lie I've ever heard in my life. She put down her spoon, looked me dead in the eye, and said, Oh, right. After the plumber left, Mina came over. She parked a few streets away because she hates driving on our block. That's probably who Jean saw leaving. The sheer mental gymnastics almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I just said, makes sense, and walked away, leaving her thinking she'd spun her way out of it. But in my head, I knew one thing for sure. If she was willing to lie this easily, I could make her hang herself with her own words. I just needed to give her enough rope. 2 days later, I set the perfect trap. I told Sumi I had to attend an emergency investor dinner in Seoul, a 3-hour drive away, and that I'd be staying overnight. I even booked a hotel room so my alibi looked bulletproof if she decided to check. Before leaving, I installed a tiny Wi-Fi camera in the living room, hidden inside the hollowed-out cover of an old speaker. It faced the front door and couch, The two places I figured anything interesting would happen. I left around 4 p.m. By 4:30, I was parked just 2 streets away, watching the live feed on my phone. At 6:12 p.m., he showed up. Same guy, same gray jacket. She opened the door for him like she'd been waiting all day. No hesitation, no awkwardness. She even kissed him before they stepped inside. They sat on the couch for a while, talking, laughing, leaning close. And then, well, let's just say I had more than enough evidence by the time I stopped the feed. Here's the kicker. Around 9 p.m., she called me. Sweet, caring, loving wife voice. Hey babe, how's dinner? I miss you. I stared at the screen, watching her lie to me in real time while that man was still in my house. It was weird. I didn't feel rage in that moment. I felt calm, cold, like something inside me had just clicked into place. This wasn't my wife anymore. This was a stranger who happened to share my last name. That night, I decided exactly how this was going to end. I waited until the next evening to confront her. She was in the living room, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. I sat down across from her, set my phone on the coffee table, and hit play. The footage rolled, her opening the door, the kiss, the two of them getting comfortable on the couch. Her face didn't crumble the way I'd imagined. She didn't cry, didn't stammer, didn't even try to deny it. She just smirked. Wow, she said, leaning back. You've been spying on me. That's pathetic. I blinked. Pathetic? That's what you're going with. She shrugged. Look, you're never home. You're obsessed with your company. You think building cars is more important than your marriage. I needed attention. From him, I asked. She crossed her arms. At least he listens to me. That one stung, but not in the way she probably intended. I realized then that she wasn't even ashamed. She'd rewritten the whole narrative in her head, so I was the villain and she was just filling in the emotional gaps. When I told her we were done, she laughed. Sure, let's see how you run your little empire without me. Little did she know, I'd already started cutting her out of everything. Bank accounts, property, even the company shares I'd put in her name early in the marriage, all in the process of being legally frozen. She thought she'd get half. I was making sure she got nothing but her own lies to keep her warm at night. The next morning, she tried her last big stunt. I was packing a suitcase in the bedroom when she walked in, suddenly all teary-eyed and soft-voiced. The smirk from last night was gone, replaced with trembling lips and a tissue clutched in her hand. I made a mistake, she whispered. I was lonely. I thought you didn't love me anymore. I didn't say a word, just kept folding my shirts. She came closer. We can fix this. You're under so much stress with Hyundai. I'll be better. I'll delete his number. We can go to counseling. Then she pulled the nuclear move, grabbed my arm, and said, I'm pregnant. I froze for a moment, then turned to her. Pregnant? Really? When's the last time we even? I stopped myself. No point. Her eyes darted away for just a second too long. That's when I knew it was a bluff. Or worse, his. I took a deep breath and said, Great. Then when the baby's born, we'll get a DNA test. Until then, I'm still leaving. Her face dropped. The tears dried up like they'd never been there. You're going to regret this, she spat. Maybe, I said, zipping the suitcase. But at least I'll regret it alone. I walked out before she could answer, the sound of the suitcase wheels dragging across the floor weirdly satisfying. 2 days later, she went nuclear. I woke up to a dozen missed calls from friends and colleagues. My phone was blowing up with screenshots. Sumi had posted this long, dramatic Facebook rant about how I had abandoned my pregnant wife for my ego and was throwing away our marriage for corporate greed. She sprinkled in just enough truth, like how I was never home, to make it sound believable to people who didn't know the full story. She even hinted that I'd been emotionally abusive and controlling with money. For a few hours, I'll admit, it worked. A couple of distant relatives called to lecture me. One old friend texted, Dude, what's wrong with you? But here's where it backfired. Remember that hidden camera footage? I still had it. I didn't post it publicly, but I sent it privately to anyone who had confronted me or taken her side. I told them, watch this, then decide if you still believe her. The shift was immediate. People stopped calling. A few even apologized. One of her own cousins messaged me saying, I can't believe she brought him into your house. By the end of the day, her big sympathy parade had turned into an awkward silence. She deleted the post without saying a word. That was when I realized She wasn't just a liar in our marriage. She was a liar to everyone. And now, her audience was starting to walk away. A week later, I finally served the divorce papers. Sumi stormed into the house screaming, waving them like a flag. "You can't do this. You'll ruin everything." I stayed calm, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. "Everything's already ruined," I said. "By your choices, not mine." She dropped the papers on the counter and pointed at me. "I'll take you to court. I'll get half of Hyundai, I swear." I laughed softly. "You think you can? Do you even know the details of how I built this company? Every patent, every partnership, it's in my name. You had nothing to do with it." Her face turned red, then paled. She realized I was right. She'd married me when Hyundai was just an idea scribbled on napkins, thinking she'd share the glory later. But she'd done nothing except lie and cheat. That night, she tried one last desperate move, showing up at my office, yelling at employees, calling me names, and threatening to sue. Security escorted her out. As I watched her drive away, screaming into her phone, I finally felt free. Not happy, not relieved, just free. The first few weeks after she was gone were strange. Quiet. Too quiet. I kept expecting her to pop up, leave another message, or somehow manipulate someone into contacting me. But she didn't. For the first time in years, I had space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to work. I threw myself into Hyundai. Every sleepless night, every gamble, every small victory became my new obsession. And you know what? It worked. Slowly, the company grew, partnerships solidified, and for the first time, I felt proud of something that was truly mine. But there were emotional echoes. Loneliness, anger, a weird mix of relief and regret. I'd loved her once. I believed in her. And even knowing she lied, cheated, and betrayed me, a part of me mourned what could have been. I started journaling at night. Just me, my thoughts, and the quiet hum of the city outside. I realized I had to let go of the idea of her and embrace the reality. I survived. I thrived. I didn't need her lies to define me anymore. That was the turning point. I didn't just rebuild Hyundai. I rebuilt myself. About 6 months later, something unexpected happened. I ran into Jahan, an old friend from my school days. We hadn't spoken in years, but he remembered the old me, the poor kid with big dreams and almost nothing else. Over coffee, he said, "Man, I've been following Hyundai. You built all this from nothing. That's insane." It hit me. I had forgotten the journey. Not the betrayal, not the sleepless nights, not the rage, but the why behind it all. I hadn't just survived my marriage. I'd achieved what most people only dream about. And I did it on my terms. Jahan shared how people we knew back then thought I'd never make it, that my dreams were too big. Hearing him talk, I realized the biggest betrayal I faced wasn't just hers. It was the doubt I carried about myself. Seeing how far I'd come gave me a strange mix of pride and peace. I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder. I was focused, driven, and for the first time in a long time, happy. That day, I decided to start mentoring young entrepreneurs. Not because I had to, but because I remembered how it felt to be the kid with nothing and a head full of dreams. By the end of that year, I finally faced the hard truths about my marriage. Sumi had been a storm in my life, chaotic, destructive, and, yes, bitterly dishonest. But the storm also forced me to grow faster than I ever would have. I learned patience, resilience, and how to trust my own judgment over someone else's sweet words. I stopped blaming her entirely. Instead, I focused on me, my choices, my reactions, my path. Every lie she told, every stunt she pulled, became a lesson. Don't let anyone control your narrative. Don't let anyone define your worth. And always keep your eyes on the bigger picture. I even forgave her in a way, not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying bitterness was heavy, and I had Hyundai to build, employees to inspire, and dreams to chase. Forgiveness meant I could finally move forward without dragging the past behind me. That night, I sat in my office, looking at the Hyundai prototype on my desk, and whispered to myself, "We did it. You did it. Not her. Me." Here's where it all comes together. Looking back, I realized my story isn't just about betrayal or heartbreak. It's about resilience, vision, and believing in yourself when everyone else, including the person closest to you, lets you down. Sumi? She's out of my life, and honestly, I don't wish her back. She taught me a harsh lesson, but she also forced me to fight for my dreams harder than I ever thought possible. Hyundai isn't just a car company. It's a symbol of purse. Protect your heart, trust your instincts, and keep building your life, brick by brick, even when it feels impossible. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most end up being the catalysts for your greatest victories. Now, every time I see a Hyundai on the road, I smile. Not because of the company, but because I survived, I thrived, and I never let betrayal stop me from becoming the person I was meant to be. If you want, I can also adapt this full story into a Level 2 English listening version with simplified sentences and key vocabulary for learners. This could make it perfect for listening practice and story-based learning. Do you want me to do that next?